Good evening all, and welcome. Thank you so much for following me on Twitter and Instagram. We have now hit 3,000 followers on each. That is amazing. So now 2 of you are going to win the competition. All that you need to do is put your Twitter and or Instagram handle down below in the comments section. If you feel that you don't want anyone to see it, you can just leave a whole load of spaces and just so that only people who put read more can actually see it. So do that and good luck. I hope you win. The winners will be announced tomorrow. Alright then guys, for now get comfortable and let the darkness take control. It's 2011. I'm newly divorced and I'm in my mid-20s and a single mother. So I decide to try out some dating sites. I start talking with this guy on one of the sites and we seem to have a lot in common. I decided to give him my phone number. He seems pretty normal and we continue chatting via text and phone calls. Well, I suggest we go get some coffee to meet up. He states he doesn't drink coffee. Okay. I suggest getting some drinks at a bar. He doesn't drink alcohol. Okay. Well, he has a great idea. Let's go for a hike. This is the first red flag, and I reluctantly agree. He wants to go to this place called Batstow in South Jersey, which is a historic village with abandoned buildings, hiking trails, and the home of the Jersey Devil. Great place for a first date. So I suggest we meet in the main parking lot, but he has a better idea. Let's meet at a train station nearby, and he'll drive us over because he knows of another entrance with better hiking trails. The next red flag. I again reluctantly agree, not wanting to be rude. So the day of the date comes, and for whatever reason, I don't tell anyone I'm doing this. I think it's because I was embarrassed and was using a dating site, and I knew somewhere in the back of my mind my friends would have talked me out of it. So I pull into the train station and he's there in a late 90s Bronco. Okay, not so bad. We can't all afford newer cars. He gets out and he's actually the guy from the picture. So that's an internal sigh of relief. We get in the car and start to head to this secret hiking trail entrance. We have a nice conversation on the way there. All seems good. We get there, and as we are getting out the car, I go grab my phone. He says, "Oh no, just leave it here. I have mine." Red flag waving in my face. Being polite and not wanting to argue, I comply. I see the entrances, and one directs you towards the village and humanity. So naturally, I suggest that one. He says no and points to the other trail that goes who knows where. I again, being the good girl that I am, say okay. Right before we set off, a bit of rebellion sets in, and I'm like, you know what? I really should have my phone on me. He starts to argue and I'm like, no, I need it in case the babysitter calls about my son. He gives it, unlocks his car, and I grab it. We set off again on the trail. We are talking and everything seems okay. I start thinking I was just overreacting. All is good. We then get to a part of the trail where we can only go one by one. So I say, you go first, I'll follow. He insists I go first in case I trip or anything and that he can grab me. I do the nervous giggle and politely decline, saying how I'm bad at following paths. He then insists I go first in a stern voice. I, stupidly, comply. The trail is getting narrower by the second, and the woods are getting darker because of the amount of trees. We are no longer talking, and the only sounds are the crunching of our footsteps. The panic starts setting in. I look back at him, and he's got this scowl on his face and a dead look in his eyes. I try to smile at him, but nothing. So I stop and say, you know what, let's turn back. I liked it better when we could walk next to each other and talk, still being polite. He says he wants to keep going this way. So I say, no, I really want to go back the other way. So I start to do just that. As I go to walk past, he grabs my arm and blocks my path. I don't say anything and just casually grab my phone out of my pocket without a word. He lets me go, just saying, whatever. And we walk back towards the car in silence, me with my phone in my hand the whole time. I amazingly did have signal, and as we were reaching the clearing where the cars are parked, he looks at his watch and states he has to go now. He has somewhere to be. We were only on this date for less than an hour, but okay, I'm not complaining. For whatever dumb reason, I get back in his car. We drive almost in near silence the entire way back to my car, and with me in a death grip on my phone and him looking miserable. He drops me off at my car and speeds away. I never heard from him again. In my naivety, I want to believe there was no chemistry between us. But let's be honest, when I decided to forget politeness and grab my phone that day, I spoiled his dastardly plans, whatever they may be. Who knows what he really had in mind for that date. This happened to me over 10 years ago, when I was younger and dumber. I made a bad decision that night, which could have ended very badly. For a long time I tried to just block it out my mind and pretended like it never happened. Mostly because I felt stupid for having put myself in that situation. But lately, I thought about it more often. I guess because now I would have handled it differently. I met Jay online. At the time, I was feeling a bit sad because things hadn't worked out between me and someone else that I had been seeing and developed some feelings for. So I was feeling vulnerable. We lived in different countries, but my parents were from his country, and we would travel there every year. I told him this when we first started talking, and he seemed interested in continuing to chat with me, even though we lived far away. It seemed alright at first. I even told him we were traveling there in just a few months, and he said he would like to go for coffee with me when I was in his city, as I would typically go there and spend a few days since I have family. I was okay with that, because he seemed like a normal guy. That is, of course, until things started to change. Not 1 week into talking, his conversations became more aggressive and sexual. Where we were on Skype one day, he asked to see my jugs. Obviously now, I would block him straight away, but back then I didn't. I declined. And he got mad, manipulating me, telling me I didn't trust him and the like. I knew he was being obscene, but I was starved for attention, even if it was in that form. I rationalized his behavior to myself that maybe he was just teasing me, or he had a bad day. Obviously, deep down, I knew I was just making excuses for him. I acted dumb, but I wasn't stupid, even though I did make stupid decisions during this entire situation. For a while, he didn't talk to me. I figured he just wasn't interested, and that was that. And, to be honest, I didn't really care. Maybe a month or so later, I get a friend request from him on Facebook. I was surprised, also curious as to why he was sending me a friend request. I accepted, and a little while later he messaged me. He asked for my phone number so he could hear my voice. Weird. He had already spoken to me several times, ignored me for weeks, then suddenly friends me and wants to hear my voice. I agreed, and we spoke a bit over the phone. He just asked random questions, nothing out of the ordinary, but I could detect a coldness in his voice. A few days after we spoke on the phone, he unfriended me. I asked him if I had done something to irritate him. His answer? No. I just don't have time for people I don't know personally as Facebook friends. His response seemed fair enough, but I knew he had friended me so that he could pry into my Facebook page, but once again I let it go. At this point I already knew something was off about him, but like I mentioned at the start, I wasn't at the best point in my life, and I figured what harm could there be in meeting him and actually confirming if I was right or not. Back then, I had the bad habit of always giving people the benefit of the doubt. Who knows, he could be completely different once we actually met in person. Fast forward a few months later, I had arrived in Europe about a week earlier and we were planning on meeting up that day. He's already coming up with excuses that he can't make it. It has to be in the evening after dinner. Keep in mind, after dinner in most European countries means 9 or 10, since many people have dinner quite late. I thought, okay, no big deal. Maybe his reasons are legit. I had seen a few red flags throughout the few months that we had spoken, but the major one came just minutes before we actually met. My plan was to have him park his car and we would walk to a coffee shop and talk. I had no intention of getting in his car. My mum had even told me to not get in his car right before I left to go meet him. I always told my parents where I was going and with who. As I waited in the hotel lobby, I get a call from him. Previously I had mentioned to him that I just wanted to grab a coffee and chat, and he could park nearby and we could walk. He was calling to complain that he couldn't find a parking space, and there was no way he could leave his car anywhere. I insisted he keep looking, because I knew for a fact there were empty spaces nearby. This is when he lost his mind and began literally screaming down the phone. "Are you deaf? There are no spaces here." This person hadn't even met me yet, and they were already raging into my ear. His voice was aggressive, and this is where I feel even more stupid. Rational smart me would have told him to piss off, blocked his number right there and then and be done with it. But vulnerable stupid me just stood there like a moron and waited for him. A minute later he pulls up and I meet him outside. He rolls down his window, but obviously, because of what happened, our interaction was cold and awkward. I once again mentioned that I would prefer if we found a parking spot and we could walk somewhere. This time he didn't blow up, but became sarcastic, repeating to me, "Oh, you want to walk somewhere?" saying it with a condescending tone. He repeated for me to get in, that we could just take a drive somewhere where we could find some place to have coffee, where he could park. He seemed like he had calmed down, but at that point, he was like a manipulative snake. My mum's words kept echoing in my head, but at the same time, I thought if something happened I could handle myself and just get out the car. On a side note, that's wrong. Ladies, never do this. Never, ever, under any circumstances, get into a car with someone who you don't know or trust. It sounds obvious, but sometimes we try to rationalize the situation like I did. That we're just being paranoid or overthinking, and feel like we can handle ourselves if the worst comes to worst. But from many stories I've heard, if you get into a car with someone who wants to harm you, your chances of getting out unharmed diminish drastically. Continuing on, I did get in. I feel emotional just sharing this now, thinking back to how stupid I was putting myself in a dangerous situation, especially after all the red flags were there. There were raging sirens, not just alarm bells. The whole time he had no expression on his face. I was trying so hard to read him, but I couldn't. His eyes were completely devoid of emotion. I asked him where we were going, and he didn't reply. He just kept driving through some old, dark and narrow cobblestone streets. I didn't take his silence for an answer, so I asked again. I've never been one to sit back and just be quiet. I can be annoying when I want to be, and that may have been what saved me that night. I kept badgering him, but he wouldn't respond. All he asked me was if, instead of coffee, we could get drinks. I told him I wasn't going to drink because I'm not a big drinker, and obviously I didn't feel comfortable drinking with him. He didn't seem to like my answer. Once again, he would just repeat back to me what I had finished saying with a sarcastic tone, and he did this a few times while I was in his car. To try and lighten the mood, as if that were even possible, I took out a pack of gum and asked if he wanted one, at the same time just jesting to see his reaction. He said no, but again, with no emotion, just a poker face. He finally told me we were going to cross the bridge to the other side. This is a bridge that crosses the river from one city to the next. Think Manhattan and Brooklyn. I immediately began to pester him that I didn't want to go and that I would prefer to just stay in the area. He opens his window saying he needs air, and I ask him why. He said it was because I was giving him a headache. Good. At that moment he starts speeding, way above the speed limit on this narrow street, and up ahead there was nothing but a brick wall. I was so scared at that moment, everything was happening so fast. I had no idea why he was doing that, but my first thought was that he was going to end our lives. I actually thought he wanted to end his own and just have me in the car with him. Sounds a bit drastic, but you have to have been there to have understood it. I looked at him wide-eyed with total fear in my eyes. This was the first time I saw him smiling since I'd gotten into the car. It's like he got this sick pleasure from seeing me panic and in a state of complete fear. Perhaps it was just because he felt like he was in control of the situation again. At that moment he slowed back down to normal driving speed. I was relieved, but I felt so afraid. I continued pestering him and told him firmly I didn't want to cross the bridge into the next city, and I said it repeatedly. At that moment my mum calls me, asking me where I was, and I did not tell her I was in the psycho's car because I didn't want her to worry. I told her I was near the hotel and I was fine, even though I wasn't. Suddenly, by the grace of the Almighty, he told me he didn't want to deal with me anymore and was dropping me off. To this day I have no idea what made him change his mind. Was it me being stubborn and irritating, and he figured someone like me would just give him a hard time? Or was it my mum's phone call? Maybe a little bit of both. Whatever the reason, I was relieved and thankful to whatever was watching over me. He dropped me off at the hotel entrance, and I immediately got out without saying a word. It was about 5 minutes of pure dread, but a bit anticlimactic. So sociopath who gave me the car ride from hell, let's not meet. To begin, this started when I was 14. I'm female, and I'm now 21. I just transferred to a new high school in the middle of the school year as a freshman with my twin sister. I was enrolled into a Spanish 2 class where I met Tony, and that is where the obsession began. But when I started my class and met Tony, I instantly thought he was attractive. He was tall, had brown hair, and beautiful eyes for a guy. Also, was a year my senior, but I did notice he was extremely shy and kind of awkward, but I made up excuses to speak with him, asking him about homework and other meaningless small talk. He took to me and asked if I wanted to walk around during lunch and talk. I happily agreed. He was obviously not very confident and didn't know how to initiate conversation. So I did most of the talking. I even went as far as asking him for his phone number. After a few days of texting and talking, I can tell he doesn't have any friends, and he's kind of negative and has a pessimistic view towards life. It was rather draining and disappointing. Things he would say were kind of unsettling, or I guess just unusual for me. He would text me fantasizing about being a superhero, kind of like roleplay, in which I was the damsel in distress and he was my savior, and text me somewhat similar to those choose your own adventure, always ending in the damsel and the hero kissing/being together. He had an obsession with Slasher from the Scream movies, but overall he was a nice guy, a bit different to what I was expecting and attracted to. Time passes. Valentine's Day is coming up. We're talking practically every day, so he asks me to be his Valentine. I agree somewhat reluctantly. So it's Valentine's Day. He walks up to me and gives me a pack of Hershey's Kisses with some Twizzlers. I don't like Twizzlers. So I hand them back to him, gave him a kiss on the cheek, and went to my class. Yes, I know that it was kind of a nasty move, but I was honestly losing interest in him at that point, and I told him before I didn't like red vines or any candy like that. During the day I received more gifts, flowers and candy from other friends, and I see Tony and I can tell he's extremely upset by this, but doesn't say anything. He messages me later in the day saying how stupid he felt, and how he was outdone by everyone else, but I didn't respond. Over the next few weeks, I gradually talk to him less and less. Class is awkward, and I can tell he wants to say something to me but never does. I later learn from my twin sister that he asked her every single day about me, if I'm talking to someone else, if I like him and how to win me over, confiding in her that he has never even spoken to a girl before. And at first I think it's sweet, but I still no longer had any romantic interest in him. We would talk at school occasionally. He would bring me homemade cookies, walk me to the train station, and still text and try to call me in the evenings after school. But I was talking to someone new who eventually became my boyfriend for the rest of high school, Brandon. When I started dating Brandon, I knew that Tony was absolutely devastated. He then started telling people around school that I was his first kiss, and I was confused because I didn't know a kiss on the cheek counted as a first kiss. But to each their own. It was somewhat upsetting because people were getting the impression that we dated, or that I had played him, which certainly wasn't the case. I would still talk to Tony as a friend. He was in the same grade and classes as my new boyfriend, and he would always tell me how much he thought Brandon didn't like him, and that he felt Brandon knew about us. I told Tony there was nothing to know about us because we weren't anything but friends, and Brandon was still totally chill and non-confrontational. Not in his nature to stir up drama over nothing, and definitely isn't the jealous type. The school year was coming to an end, and Tony comes running up to me after the last day of school and hands me this 60 to 70 page notebook, wide-ruled, explaining all the ways he's in love with me, and how everyone at the school thinks poorly of me, and how he can treat me better. I read it once, showed my twin, and she tells me how weird and uncomfortable it makes her. We both agree on that. I stash it away, and don't speak of it to anybody. I act like nothing happened, and I still talk to him as a friend occasionally. I worked a lot in high school in my free time, and spent a lot of time with my boyfriend and friends, so didn't think much of Tony. Time goes by. We eventually pretty much cease all communication. I see him around school and he never really is with anybody else. He's usually always alone, which I don't find strange anymore, considering how awkward and quiet he can be. Another year goes by. I'm a junior. Tony and Brandon are both seniors getting ready to graduate, and Tony texts me out the blue and tells me he's written a book and it would mean the world if I would be the first to read it and give him feedback. Being the person that I am, I agree. So he comes up to me at school the next day and hands me this fat notebook and tells me to take my time reading it and give him honest feedback when I was finished. I read this story in 4 class periods, and it was around 300 pages long. The story takes place in a Game of Thrones era. The 3 main characters are Eric, Tony, Alva, me, and Isaac, Brandon. For the sake of confusion, I'll be referring to the characters by our names. The only reason I know the characters were us, and not fictional, was simply by the way he described them. literally identical to our physical appearances. Tony was the son of the king, or whatever, and the rest of us were mere peasants. But Tony was always in love with me, but I was with Brandon. It was the annual time where our kingdom would go to battle with another for honor, glory, gladiator style. Tony thought it would be wonderful to prove himself and volunteered. The night before our kingdom traveled to where the battle would commence, my character went to Tony in the middle of the night to express her love and fear, and they ended up having a very graphic night of passion. It was truly disturbing. The next day after they had arrived at the place of battle, my character was sent to his room, where the same graphic encounter occurred again. And during, Brandon came looking for my character, in which we were caught. My character told Tony I didn't really love him, and ran to Brandon to apologize for being a harlot. Tony was devastated and ultimately let his opponent kill him in battle because he couldn't handle the loss of losing the love of his life. Our kingdom goes back home, and it's in the middle of the night that Brandon sneaks through the window and murders me. He slits my throat. The end. As you can imagine, I was absolutely horrified and creeped out. I threw the book away and never told Tony what I thought about it. He must have known, because he never asked for it back. Tony and Brandon both graduate, and life goes on. Tony didn't try and reach out to me for a few years, until I was around 20. He messaged me on Instagram in the middle of the night. He said, and I quote, "Show me your feet. Submit to daddy. I always looked at your feet at school and would fantasize about them," along with links to a few foot fetish websites. I promptly blocked him. The next day, he messaged me on another account, a foot fetish and bondage account he ran. He asked me why I blocked him, and I blocked him again. Earlier last year, on my new account, he messages me basically calling me a harlot again, and how he wishes I would pass away, and how he hated everyone we went to school with and hoped that they would all pass away as well, and how he fantasized how he would end me for all the pain I caused him. I was genuinely afraid, but I didn't know how to handle this situation. Was it a mortal threat? I don't know. I later learned that he worked at a diner down the street from my apartment. I avoided it at all costs. I have since moved, and I haven't heard from Tony since, but multiple girls I went to high school with told me he was obsessed with me, and would constantly talk about me to them, and how he would message them the same disgusting things while he was on a drunken stupor. Anyway, Tony, let's not meet again. This just happened 5 months ago, and it's quite fresh in my mind. I am a 23-year-old female who met with Jason, a 29-year-old male, on an app last September. We clicked immediately, and from then went out about once a week, sometimes twice. I've spent the past year going on dates out to nice restaurants, garden walks, and spending the nights. We've established that we had feelings for each other about 2 months into everything, though we've had our rocky moments and I didn't fully trust him. At one point I wanted to date, but he claimed he was too busy with work, which subsequently caused us to separate for a while. Once we eventually came back together, I told him I didn't want to be exclusive, but we could still hang out as I enjoyed his company. Now, there was always some sneaking suspicions that there was another partner in his life, because he always paid in cash wherever we went, and was very secretive about his private life. I had voiced these thoughts to him, but honestly didn't care too much because he told me he wasn't interested in dating me after I started seeing another partner and was using protection with both of them. Meanwhile, he didn't want to date me, but raged whenever he thought there was another man around my life. He had established some concerning and possessive behaviors, but I let them slide for the most part because I was still doing whatever I wanted. Fast forward to tonight, 14 months after we met. We went to a really nice restaurant downtown after work. and I asked if he wanted to take the subway back to my place since we had a few drinks. We stopped by his car to grab his bag, and off we went to the station. When we got to the station, he said he forgot his card in the car, and I figured it was no biggie and swiped for him. I said he didn't need to pay me back because it was like $2, but he insisted he would Venmo me. When we get to my apartment, I told him he was welcome to take a shower, and he went to the bathroom. I was messing around on my phone and saw CS had sent me $2 for the train. It was weird to me because his initials are JN, so I clicked on his Venmo friends list. He had about 20 Venmo friends, and I picked a random person and looked them up on Facebook. I went down their friends list, and would you look at that, a picture of Jason and his brothers. The only issue was his name was Chase Smith. The photo did look a little different because he was about 50 to 60 pounds heavier in the photograph and is currently very fit, but I was 90% sure it was him. Just to confirm, I googled his name and the area around which he lived and got a hit on white pages. It said he was related to Velma and Shaggy Smith, and I remembered him telling me that his siblings were named Velma and Shaggy. So it turned out I didn't even know the name of the guy I've been boinking for a year. He got out the shower and sat down on my bed. I was quiet and looked at his face, asking, "Is your real name Chase Smith?" This guy looked me dead in the eye and said, "No." I lost it. I made like the leave Britney alone guy. I looked cool, calm and collected and started crying and telling him to get out my house. He approached me and I told him not to touch me, but he grabbed my wrists and insisted that we talk about it. I told him to leave and never come back, but he refused to leave for a while until eventually he did. Afterwards, I looked a little deeper and found out he has a criminal record, though I can't see what they're from. From his past behaviors, I'm honestly a little worried for my safety, because I immediately blocked him on everything and know for a fact he's going to go crazy when he realizes he can't contact me. Everything has been a lie. When you think you know someone, it turns out they're probably crazy. In any case, my sister continued to sleuth. Turns out today he slightly changed the spelling of his last name on Facebook, probably to deter others he's been messing with to find his profile. He doesn't know how I found him and doesn't realize that the spelling of his last name wasn't relevant in the process. The dude is an actual psycho who's probably doing this to multiple women. I'm honestly more afraid for them than myself, because they clearly don't know what's going on if he's taking further steps to hide himself. I wish I knew who they were, so that I could warn them. I had gotten out of an 8-year abusive relationship and met someone on a popular online dating app. To be honest, I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to go watch a movie with or have a drink every now and then. I had 2 boys and was happy and living a peaceful life on my own after going through hell. So I met this guy who's just a couple of years older than me, and he has turned his life around. When he was younger, he used to be in gangs and drugs, and now he was into working out and staying fit and doing family stuff. I guess you can say I felt protected by him. He was a hard worker, self-sufficient, had a son, and he loved going to the gym daily. I myself had kind of a crazy past, but overcame it, and we seemed like a good fit. We would go to dinner, movies, normal dating stuff, but eventually wanted to spend more and more time together, and I was having trouble freeing up my time for him, and he would get angry, like really angry about this. After being with a controlling and possessive person for so long, this was obviously a red flag after 3 months, and I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. He said he needs to confess something. He admitted he was using steroids, and that was the reason for his mood swings. He cried and said he was sure that was the reason and was willing to stop if it meant we could have another chance. And I obliged only under the condition that we remained friends. Things were okay for a while. We saw each other maybe every other week, and he started wanting to see me every week. to which I told him that I was not interested in being anything other than friends at the moment, since I was not ready for a relationship. He tried to talk me into giving him another chance, but I just didn't find myself interested in a romantic way with him, so I insisted that we just remain platonic. I had to stop talking to him because I got angry at his insistence that we still talk daily, as he said that's what friends do. He would always ask about my whereabouts, ask for pictures of who I was hanging out with, and I told him that this is not what friends do, and he just insisted he innocently wanted to know what I was up to. 6 months later, I hadn't spoken to him at all. I was happy and living my life, and on one particular night, my youngest son was at his dad's. I went out to the local bar for a drink with friends. My oldest, who was 13 at the time, was home alone, so I left a little early to make it home for 10 p.m. I lay down in bed and go to sleep. So a little info on my living situation. I had been living in my condo for almost a year now, and we lived in a great safe community and would leave my patio sliding glass door open to let the breeze in at night. No biggie. My bedroom was close to the patio and my son would sleep in the loft that was closest to the front door. I'm dead asleep when suddenly I feel someone slowly sit on my bed. I'm laying in bed, wondering why my son would come sit on my bed so slowly. He wouldn't. I turn around and it's him, Mario, laying down in bed next to me. I sit up and ask him how he got in. He doesn't answer and just says, "I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay, when you need to talk to someone, you don't sneak into someone's room. You call them, you leave a note for them, literally anything but this." I'm thinking I'm gonna kill my kid for letting him in. And he said, "I didn't have your number anymore. I need to talk to you before it's too late." I didn't even entertain the "before it's too late" bit because I was livid. But something told me to keep my cool. I sit up and say, "Look, I really want to talk to you too, but not like this. Please just leave and I promise we can talk tomorrow. Call me tomorrow." He gets up, walks over to my side of the bed and starts rubbing my shoulders and is slowly making his way to my neck. He says, "Do you really want to talk?" I look him in the eyes and say, "Yes, I've been wanting to talk to you, but not like this. Call me tomorrow." He stares at me while rubbing my neck, goes down to my shoulders and says, "Okay." He then proceeds to exit through my patio door, jumps my patio wall, which tells me this is exactly how he got in. I freak the hell out, check on my kid, who had no idea what was going on, locked all my doors, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, I message him and tell him that if I ever see him near me or on my complex, I'll call the police and to never contact me again. If you're wondering why I didn't call the cops to begin with, I knew he had a firearm, so I was scared of being retaliated against for being a snitch. And B, I figured if I called the cops, they would probably not do much, just let him out, and I was afraid of what he would do after. Either way, he left me alone, and I didn't hear from him for years. 4 years later, I'm scrolling through Facebook, and I see his face in People You May Know. I click the picture and notice that it looks like a jail picture. You know those pictures where the guy is clearly in a jail cell? I scroll down the page and his recent post is him posting his address for his family to write to, a prison address. So I Google his name, and sure enough, articles, all with the same headline, "Man arrested on suspicion of killing girlfriend." About 2 years after I had dated him, he shot and killed his girlfriend he was dating. That could have been me. And I feel like crap, thinking if there was anything I could have done to stop him. Scarier still is that he only got 12 years for his horrific crimes. At age 13, some random dude added me on Snapchat. I ignored it, of course, but asked my friends if they knew who he was, just in case. One of my best friends told me this guy dated her older sister, and he was 19 with a 2-year-old daughter. Now I definitely knew not to add him back. 1 week later he sent me a snap, even though I didn't add him back, and said, "Morning." I ignored it. Later that night he sent me another snap, a picture of himself, and said, "Hey," and I blocked him. Granted, he didn't know I was only 13, but I didn't want to have to talk to him. The next day a new account adds me with no Bitmoji and a very slow snap score. I ignored the request, but that didn't stop the person from texting me. Guess who it was? The same dude from yesterday messaged me and asked, "Why did you block me?" I figured it was the same guy, but I wanted to make sure it was him. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "I'm..." insert username that I blocked. "Oh, I blocked you because my friend told me you dated her sister and you're 19 and I'm 13, so we probably definitely shouldn't be talking." "There's nothing wrong with being friends." "Sorry, I wouldn't be comfortable with that." "It's because I'm ugly." "No, it's because you're 19. At this point I was uncomfortable and didn't want to talk to him. He kept telling me about how girls ignore him because he's ugly, and he prefers talking to younger girls before they're nicer. Did you just hear the same thing I heard? I blocked him. 2 weeks later, a dude on Instagram requests to follow me. I checked their account out. He seemed to be about my age and had several photos of himself on the account. He looked cute and seemed legit, so I let him follow me back. It's not like I post anyway. I considered it could be the guy, but I thought that perhaps I was just being paranoid. Oh, silly me. The dude texted me, "Hey." So I responded and we start talking. I currently have internet friends and I never give away private information even if I know they're legit. This guy starts asking me questions and I'm upfront about how I won't give much away. He says he understands and we keep talking. One day he asks to FaceTime and I say yes, because I figured that since he's willing to FaceTime, he's real. No. He answers and it was the same guy I'd already blocked twice. I hang up, and before I block him he messages me saying he created this account so that I could see he was a nice guy. I told him to never message me again and blocked him for a third time. This happened 3 months ago. Never heard from him again, until yesterday. I babysit every once in a while and have an app that tells me when someone wants to babysit. I get a notification that someone wants me to babysit one kid for 4 hours and is offering $40. I jump at the opportunity because that's $10 per hour and very rare in the babysitting business. I get an address, tell my mum where to drop me off the next day, and she does, and I knock on the door. My mum never leaves until she knows I'm safely inside the house and sees an adult wave. The door opens, and it's the guy from 3 months ago. He smiles and tells me to come in. I back away, tell him that he needs to leave me alone and that I'm leaving. He tells me to wait, he actually does need a babysitter for his 2-year-old kid. I tell him no way and walk off. What he yelled back was something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. "But she wants you to be her new mother." That was it. I ran from the door and into the passenger seat of my mum's car. Thank goodness she was still there. I told her we needed to get the hell out of there and that I'll explain on the way. I told her the whole story and we called the cops when we got home. They come to my house, get statements, and they say they can charge him with stalking if we wanted to. But I decide no, because I've had run-ins with the legal system before and it's a mess. I started the paperwork for a restraining order. I still have no idea how this man knew what my Instagram was, whose pictures he was using, how he knew what I looked like, and how he found me on the babysitting app. So creepy 19-year-old who stalked me and tricked me into going to his house, let's never meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories. People certainly be crazy, and ladies and guys, just anyone, please don't get in strangers' cars. That is a really bad idea. Really bad. I've heard and read so many stories where people get into the cars of strangers And it's like instant regret. You know you shouldn't do it, you still get in, and then you're like, oh man, if something happens, I'm going to be completely screwed. So please, listen to your gut. It's there for a reason. I hope you liked today's video. If of course you did, you know what to do down below. And speaking of which, leave a comment to win the prizes, which will be announced tomorrow. That's going to be fun. Thank you as always to my wonderful patrons. If my rewards interest you, you can find the information on Patreon. You get some cool prizes for signing up. There's now actually a video when you sign up describing the prizes in more detail. So yeah, I hope you guys will consider. If there's a story of something horrible or terrible that you've had happen to you and you would like to share it, you can send it to my email or post it to my Reddit. Alright then guys, for now I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.